Hey neighborhood, thanks for hanging out with us today for Church at Home. My name is Jason and I'm part of the team here. We want you to stay connected and stay in the loop with everything happening here at Neighborhood this month. Head to ncvisalia.com to see what's going on, or follow us on social media, or download the NC app to your phone or device. Well, a new year is here, and that comes with new opportunities to follow Jesus together. Check out our current small groups at the link below, including our NC Midweek Study, where we dive deeper into each week's message. And of course, our current group opportunities all include social distancing protocols to keep our community safe, so check them out. Hey, thank you so much for giving to the mission at Neighborhood Church. Your generosity is what fuels everything we do. If you haven't yet made an investment, we want to invite you to be a part of what Jesus is doing here in Visalia. There are a few ways you can give. You can head to ncvisalia.com/give or text NC Visalia to 77977. And now, let's continue with our new series, I Said This, You Heard That.
Well, good morning, everyone. We're in week 2 of our teaching series we're calling, I Said This, You Heard That. And we're looking at our words and the impact and influence our words have on our worlds. Because we spend a good majority of our life using words. In fact, last week we mentioned some pretty incredible statistics. Like on average, we speak 16,000 words per day. And that's equivalent to writing 100 250-page books every year. One way or another, we spend our lives communicating, and the quality of our communication determines the quality of our lives, because what we say matters. And yet, for as much talking as we tend to do, we still seem to get it wrong on a pretty regular basis, right? Because there's a difference between having the ability to speak and then being able to effectively communicate and connect with the person across from you. Right? Just think about the times you've said the wrong thing, or said the right thing, but at the wrong time, or you said the right thing, but in the wrong way, or you said nothing when you should have said something, or you said something when you really should have said nothing. Or think about the time you were struck with the most common of all viruses found in our mouths. You know the one. It's called foot-and-mouth disease. Right? You know what I'm talking about. That time you asked a woman when she was due, only to find out she wasn't pregnant. Or that time you saw a cute baby or toddler and asked how old he was, only to find out the child was a she, or vice versa. I actually have vivid memories of being on the receiving end of someone putting their foot in their mouth. A couple of years back, myself and a friend of mine, who's just 1 year younger than myself, we were at the gym working out together, when we run into a distant acquaintance of his who looks at my friend and says, "Hey, you're working out with your dad. That's pretty cool." What? Are you kidding me? I mean, just kill me. Now my friend has something to hang over me until the day we die, which, according to this person, will come much earlier for me than my friend. Here's my point. We've all been given this superpower of language, and it's critical we learn to wield this power responsibly, because what we say matters. Our words are extraordinarily powerful. Your life has been shaped, my life has been shaped by the words that were spoken to us, the words that were spoken over us, and the words that were spoken about us. Words shaped our childhood experiences. Words are shaping your marriages and your most intimate relationships. Words impact your self-confidence. Words impact who you see when you look in the mirror. People with no confidence have gained confidence simply through words spoken over them. And people with incredible confidence have lost confidence because of words spoken to them. And what can make words, I think, so challenging is that the words we receive and the words we speak, here's the thing, they're not equally weighted, are they? How many more positives does it take to counter one negative comment? I've actually read lots of different statistics on this, but it would seem it's somewhere between 5 and 7, as in, we need to hear 5 to 7 encouraging comments to counter just one negative comment in our lives, right? It's not a one-to-one ratio. When you hear a negative, right, one simple positive doesn't counter that negative because our words are not equally weighted, right? Negative words seem to weigh 5 to 7 times more than an encouraging word. And this becomes really important for us to understand when we consider that most of our relationships are actually existing in an environment where for every one compliment or encouraging comment, there are 6 complaints or criticisms, 6 to 1 leaning towards the negative, right? And we said this last week, but I think this explains, at least in part, why so many work environments are toxic. Why so many marriages are in trouble, why kids are experiencing anxiety, depression, and extreme insecurity at such young ages. When our words are unequally weighted, negative weighing 5 to 7 times more than positive, and when our ratios are 6 to 1 leaning towards negative, what kind of culture are we creating? What kind of generation are we raising? What kind of marriages are we modeling? Clearly, something has got to change. And we actually think we found the key to this change in some advice given by a first-century Christian leader named Paul. And he wrote a letter to some friends to encourage them in the way of Jesus. And as part of that letter, he wrote these words: "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Now, if you missed last week, we've said that this teaching series is actually rooted in this one passage, because in it we find the secret sauce to changing the ratios in our relationships from bending towards negative to bending towards positive. And today I want to just keep giving us ways of understanding what Paul's suggesting here. And one thing I want to make sure is clear for us is that this is not Paul's way of saying, look, when you're talking to people, just be nice. Now, it's true, you should be nice, but that's not Paul's point. Paul's point is, I want you to be helpful. I want you to be helpful, right? And that could mean just being nice, but it could also mean maybe needing to say hard things. We need to evaluate kind of where we're coming from, right? And for some of us, it means, listen, we need to dial it down and dial it back. And others of us, we may need to step it up and kind of say some of the hard things and say what needs to be said. But just remember, regardless of what you say, the driving principle is this: your words are to be helpful, and they're to be helpful according to the person you're talking to, not just what you think is helpful. Don't just open your mouth because you feel like you should say something. Don't ask the question, should I say something? That's about you, not the listener. Rather ask, does this person need to hear from me? Would this be helpful? Or how can I say this in a way that is helpful to them? And remember, in this passage, Paul's using construction language to make his argument, beginning with that word unwholesome. Paul says, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. And last week we made the point, this isn't Paul saying, don't use naughty words. No, rather the word Paul uses in his native Greek is sapros. And it's used to describe stones that are crumbling, like a building that's falling apart and in ruin. And then he follows this falling apart imagery with another construction word, building. Paul's saying, look, instead of you using your words to tear down, I want you to use your words for building up, right? It's as if Paul's saying, and I love this, that he says, I want you to imagine that every conversation you have is like a construction site. And your words are the building material, right? And you're responsible, right? You're responsible for it because you're interfacing with people that God loves. And your responsibility is to consider every single word something that you could use to build that other person up. So that when you leave the construction site, when you leave the conversation, they're better off for having been with you. Okay, let me shift gears here for a moment, because we said not only is this series rooted in Paul's words, the series is also paired with a practical tool, the 4 Temperaments Assessment. Now, if you haven't had an opportunity to take the assessment, you can still do that by visiting ncvisalia.com/quiz. Now, we've said that understanding the 4 temperaments of human behavior is critical to pulling off the advice Paul is giving us, because your temperament determines the words you speak, but also the words you need to hear. And because each temperament is unique, there are words that are more helpful to some temperaments than others. In fact, let me unpack this for a moment so we can begin to understand the different temperaments and the words that we need to hear. You might remember the categories, right? There's the yellow sanguines. And yellow sanguines, they need approval. And approval for a yellow sounds like being liked for who they are without needing to change. Yellows need acceptance, which sounds like being invited and included. These sanguines, they need attention, which sounds like having your full focus, especially eye contact. Yellows need affection, which sounds like being noticed and acknowledged. But red cholerics are different. The red cholerics, they need loyalty, and for them it sounds like being prioritized and knowing you have their back. Reds need a sense of control, which sounds like everyone pulling their weight and following the plan. They need appreciation, which sounds like being valued for their unique strengths. They need credit for work, which sounds like being valued for their contributions. Right? Then there's the blue melancholics, and they need safety. And safety for the blue, it sounds like being able to trust their surroundings and their relationships. They need sensitivity, which sounds like being understood, and support, which sounds like being offered or provided help. They need space and silence for having time to decompress, process, or think. And then finally, the green phlegmatics. They need harmony. And for them, this sounds like everyone getting along and everything going smoothly. They need feeling of worth, which sounds like being valued for their uniqueness. They need, this is big, lack of stress, which sounds like an absence of conflict and combative words. And finally, respect, which for the green sounds like being asked for their thoughts and opinions. Okay, now that we have an understanding of what each temperament needs, if we're to keep Paul's words in mind here, this is the principle we need to grasp. Knowing your own needs is important, but knowing the needs of the other person is essential if the goal is that they leave the conversation being better off for having been with you. Remember the communication principle we learned last week. Communication always happens on the listener's terms. So if we care about the person across from us and want to be relationship builders with our words, it begins with understanding what the other person needs. And how do we know what the other person needs? Well, their temperament tells us. And when we can speak according to our listener's temperament, it changes everything. It shifts the ratios in our relationships from negative to positive. Speaking according to someone else's temperament builds, while speaking according to your temperament tends to tear down. Let me give you just a couple of examples, right? Let's imagine you're a blue husband, right? Listen, when you can extinguish the joy, for example, of a spontaneous date with your yellow spouse when you insist how much better it could have been had you just been able to plan ahead. Or for those of you that are yellow and leaders, right? There's people that follow you, right? Dismissing the research your blue teammate puts in to the process of just strategic decision making, right? And you just dismissing it, citing your gut feeling, right? It's demotivating, and actually it's quite offensive to blues. Or you red moms barking at your green daughter in the morning, hurry up, right? This is the opposite of lack of stress that she craves. Okay, let me just quickly take us back to our anchor passage. I want to show you one more insight that I think might be helpful for us. Again, what Paul writes, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Now, let's look specifically at the phrase that it may benefit those who listen. Now, you have to remember, again, the Bible didn't fall out of the sky, written in the 21st century, written in English, right? No, it's an ancient book written in 3 separate languages, none of those being English. And our friend Paul wrote in Greek. And the phrase benefit those who listen, right, in the English, it's actually 2 Greek words. The first Greek word is didomai, and that means to give or administer something. The second word is charis, and charis is the word for grace. So listen, in other words, Paul is saying, if you're going to speak, if you're going to open your mouths, do so in a way that is administering grace. Our words are to be dispensers of grace. And when we take the time to understand who it is we're speaking to and what it is they need from us, when we do that, we're speaking the language of grace. And the language of grace has transformational power. And here's why. Because it's the language that God speaks to us in. God's words to you and God's words to me are gracious. They are grace-giving words according to all of our unique needs. In fact, that's actually how I'd like to close our time this morning. I would just like to speak over you the words that God has spoken to you, that you may discover or be reminded what it feels like to have grace spoken to you. And hopefully, as a result, we'll become better at speaking grace to others. Here's what God says to you, that you're chosen, holy and blameless. You're forgiven. You're redeemed, not condemned. You are brand new, a new creation. You are the righteousness of God. You've been made complete in Jesus. You are a saint. Believe it or not, that's God's word to you. You're a saint. That you're God's artwork, his masterpiece. That you were created on purpose for a purpose. That you've been given God's Spirit to guide and comfort you. That you're acceptable and desirable. That you're a welcome citizen of heaven. That you're adopted as a child and an heir. That you're pledged with an inheritance. And that you are blessed with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. All I have to say to that is amen. Hey, I love you guys, and we'll see you next week. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
I've searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures of faith I never knew. When you came along and put me back together. Is now satisfied here in love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. And I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you see them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place where your mercy and grace won't find me again. And oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. And oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. You turn into dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. And oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. And oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways.